wallet. This is
Carol Ball.
No, Dad has to go.
Said what?
Josh.
It was in the Asheville.
Josh, come here, see? That's what he had set up. That's the back of it.
The ball?
And the ball was a stand back there.
No.
That was on front of it. And it hit, and that was part of the tree.
Yeah.
It's awesome. And Brandon into it too. Mom wanted it, but he gave it to me.
That's awesome.
She made that though.
Yeah.
Look what Dad made.
I stay up late too. I'm Trey's son.
Oh, beautiful.
Says part of the scope he cut off. Yeah, the imprint was printed in there.
That's really cool.
That was the back of it.
That looks awesome.
I seen it up chief, Hallmark moves on it this month. And
Yeah.
it looks like it's gonna be good.
It's gonna
I got-
be good.
I got 4 stripes in that. I got 4 stripes in that.
Hello, ladies. How are y'all? Y'all ready for Thanksgiving?
This song.
I'm in charge of bringing green bean casserole. I make that. That's what my granddaughter used to do. That's what I'm excited about it. I normally bake cookies. Like I also bake like cookies and stuff. But a lot of his family's on like diets and stuff, so I'm not baking cookies. I might for ourselves, but not for share. Yeah, it's the best time. Well, it makes the whole house smell good, and it's nice and warm, and it's just nice. Hello. Say what? Oh, okay. I'm so glad to hear that.
moved the laundry, the washer and dryer, cleaned up behind it.
All right, let's go ahead and get started tonight.
Sorry, last time you saw me,
So, we are taking a look at Thanksgiving Psalms, the day before Thanksgiving. Let me say, this was not intended, I did not plan it like this. I could probably come off looking like, oh, wow, he really planned. No. I've just been working through things, and it just so happened that this is how we got here. So, if you want to think me a genius or something, do whatever you want. But this is just sort of serendipitous timing if you know. Anyway, how many of you read through Psalm 75? How many?
I forgot which one it was.
You can text me, brother. It's okay. You don't have to say that out loud. It's all right. It's all right. You and the other 80% didn't do it probably, right? So I'm not going to ask how many did it. But how many? Yeah, I am. How many did it? There. It's Psalm 75. If you have not read it, let me recommend you read it while I am telling you about Thanksgiving Psalms and setting up this little discussion about this. Thanksgiving Psalms are just that. They express gratitude and praise for what God has done both in the life of the psalmist and at times corporately for his people. Now, they are generally lumped in, depends on who you look at. There's some subjective aspects to how we group these psalms together. Some people group them under praise psalms. Some people group Thanksgiving psalms and praise psalms together under a different kind of title. The fact is, they're closely related to one another. It can be defined like this: Psalms of thanksgiving that give thanks to God because He has responded to a specific request for help, which leads to an offering of sacrifice of thanksgiving at the temple as the psalmist celebrates God's deliverance. That's generally how we understand the idea or the concept behind Thanksgiving Psalms. If you remember, we talked about Psalms of orientation, Psalms of disorientation, and Psalms of reorientation. This is a Psalm of reorientation. It praises God for the reordering of life as the psalmist has come through on the other side, and his life is now finding firmness again, and the world begins to work as expected. So it's this psalm of a reoriented life. They're most often personal in nature. Okay? This particular one is corporate. It's not personal. Now, here is Psalm 30 as an example of what a personal Thanksgiving psalm sounds like. I will extol you, O Lord, for you have drawn me up and have not let my foes rejoice over me. O Lord my God, I cried to you for help, and you have healed me. O Lord, you have brought my soul up from Sheol. You restored me to life from among those who go down to the pit. Sing praises to the Lord, O you, his saints, and give thanks to his holy name, for his anger is but a moment, and his favor is for a lifetime. Weeping may tarry for the night, but joy comes with the morning. As for me, I said, in my prosperity I shall never be moved. By your favor, O Lord, you made my mountain stand strong. You hid your face. I was dismayed. To you, O Lord, I cry, and to the Lord I plead for mercy. What profit is there in my death if I go down to the pit? Will the dust praise you? Will it tell of your faithfulness? Hear, O Lord, and be merciful to me. O Lord, be my helper. You have turned for me my mourning into dancing. You have loosed my sackcloth, which of course is a symbol of mourning or self-affliction, and clothed me with gladness, that my glory may sing your praise and not be silent. O Lord my God, I will give you thanks. I will give thanks to you forever. That is what a standard, the most common variant of these Thanksgiving Psalms sound like. It is based on what God has done for the psalmist himself, individually. It's very personal. And you see the turnaround in his life as he goes from orientation to disorientation to reorientation and into a new, part of life, having been restored or delivered from whatever the danger was. You get the idea. Now, these particular Thanksgiving Psalms can also be community or communal in nature, which is basically what God has done for Israel. Now, take a look at the first verse, and I'm just going to put it up on the screen for you so you can see it. What is the clue in the first verse that tells us that this is a communal or a community Thanksgiving rather than an individual Thanksgiving? We. And little clue, it's just one little word, right? But these clues key us into what to expect in this particular psalm. We see, let me grab a blue because I'm feeling like that today. We. How many of you have something different in that third colon there when it comes to, in your translation? Do you have something other than we?
Men.
Huh?
Men and they.
Men? Okay. People. How many have people? How many have men? Something more just non-specific, right? That is, there's a sort of that's more accurate to the actual text. There's a sort of a interpretive aspect going on here in the ESV, and it can be translated as we, but it's more specifically people or, just a generic kind of thing. It goes from we. It's obviously talking about the same group of people. Who's the we in this? Okay, how do we know that?
Because it says so.
Come on now.
It says the inhabitants thereof and congregation.
Okay.
It's the whole group of people.
Yeah, and you can go down and look who the psalmist praises in verse 9. Psalmist praises the God of Jacob. Now, obviously, if it's from Asaph was a priest who was involved with the music of the temple and worship and things of that nature during the time of David, and his descendants was engaged in that particular activity as well. So we know that, but just when you have that kind of non-specific thing going on, it's good to have that in your mind, what we're talking about here. The community psalms, these community psalms of thanksgiving, they often have statements of victory, or they have many sort of affinities with statements of victory. Let's go ahead and just read this psalm. And yes, you can see on the screen my strophe summaries. So if you haven't done it and you're don't cheat off what I've got, make your own stuff. But there you go. We give thanks to you, O God. We give thanks for your name is near. We recount your wondrous deeds. At the set time that I appoint, I will judge with equity. And when the earth totters and all its inhabitants, it is I who keep steady its pillars. I say to the boastful, do not boast, and to the wicked, do not lift up your horn. Do not lift up your horn on high or speak with a haughty neck. For not from the east or from the west, and not from the wilderness comes lifting up, but it is God who executes judgment, putting down one and lifting up another. For in the hand of the Lord there is a cup with foaming wine, well mixed, and he pours it out, and all the wicked of the earth shall drain it down to the dregs. But I will declare it forever. I will sing praises to the God of Jacob. All the horns of the wicked I will cut off, but the horns of the righteous shall be lifted up. Now, what phrases that you find in that psalm suggest to you the theme of victory for some and defeat for others? What's the theme? What kind of phrases and imagery point to the idea of victory in this particular psalm? Where can we find it? What are you seeing right there?
I will declare forever.
Sorry?
I will declare forever. Chapter 9, verse 9.
Verse 9. Let's see. But I will declare it forever. I will sing the praises. Well, that's him. Yes, in a way. I think there might be clearer statements though. Just so look at like verse 10. Verse 10. What's the dynamic in verse 10?
All the horns of the wicked he will cut off, so he will.
Okay, so take a look at that. You have the wicked
In contrast,
being cut off,
the righteous shall be lifted up.
right, and the righteous shall be lifted up. Now that's a contrast right there. That's a picture of victory for one group and a resounding defeat for the other. One is being exalted, the other one is being humiliated. The other one is being disciplined or being subject to the judgment of God. And you see this dynamic throughout this particular song. The idea of being lifted up by God versus being cut off by God. You see it in verse 7. It is God who executes judgment, putting down one and lifting up the other. Now, this is not some arbitrary raising and lowering just for the sake of like some mischievous God doing weird stuff to mess with people. This is raising and lowering has to do with the way that they relate to God, the way that they relate to his statutes that are a reflection and flow from his character, that reflect his nature. So there's much that can be said about that. Do we have any New Testament parallels for this kind of thought? This kind of, this one group will be raised, but this other group will be humbled or humiliated or whatever it might be. Can you think of some New Testament parallels for that?
Think about a lot of the times when Jesus is speaking to the Pharisees and their perceived righteousness, and how many times Jesus kind of brings the idea of your perceived righteousness is so far from God's actual standard of righteousness.
Yeah, and he kind of gets down to the point of that. He really hammers it home in 23.
Yeah.
You look like this, but in reality, you're this, and until you become like this, you are basically cut off. Your temple has been left you desolate, basically. That's pretty strong condemnation. Consider James chapter 4, 6 through 10. But it says, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Submit yourselves, therefore, to God. Resist the devil. Now, this is in the context of people acting worldly and the worldly disputes and problems of people who operate according to the wisdom of the world rather than the wisdom from above, which is decidedly different. He says, resist the devil and he'll flee from you, and draw near to God and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Be wretched and mourn and weep, and let your laughter be turned to mourning and your joy to gloom. And here you go, humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up. But earlier we see, it's a reference to an Old Testament passage, stated here again, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. God cuts down, God humiliates, God lowers, God judges, God, you get the idea, the arrogant, the proud, the haughty. There was that weird phrase earlier, the haughty neck, which could, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but he does what to the humble? Exalts, raises up, lifts up. This dynamic that you see it in the Sermon on the Mount. various places. You see it with the idea of blessed are the, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Well, if the meek are the ones who are blessed or blessed, there's a tacit sort of condemnation of the opposite of that. One is lifted up and exalted, the other one is humiliated. You get sort of the picture here. You see it going on. Matthew 23:12, going back to talking to the Pharisees that we saw here. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. Again, that's the passage that we see in James. And it goes on and on. So, these Psalms also seek the importance of God-centered gratitude. God is at the center of this particular expression of gratitude. One encyclopedia put it this way. It said, they demonstrate the active involvement of God in the life of his people because they are thanking God for the active engagement of deity in their lives, in the extrication, the providential extrication from whatever situation or deliverance from whatever situation they may have found themselves in. What then, if we consider all of this in light of this particular psalm, what then is Israel and thus the psalmist expressing gratitude for? Because let's admit, I didn't give you an easy one here on this one. I kind of threw you a curveball with this one a little bit. What if a psalm of thanksgiving is about gratitude and expressing thanksgiving for something, what are they giving thanks for here? Yeah, go ahead. You don't have to.
I think they're saying we recognize God as righteous and holy, and he lifts up the humble. And so by implication, they're ascribing righteousness and humbleness to themselves, and they're thanking God for lifting them up.
Okay. And that has come about as a result of there's an awful lot of time spent on the discussion of judgment, divine judgment, the mechanism of humiliation versus exaltation, right? And we don't know. And if you look at the commentaries, they may try to guess what the cultural situation was, what the historical situation was behind this psalm. There is absolutely no way to know from this psalm what the historical situation is. There just isn't. And you might say, well, this forms a larger collection. So you know how sometimes there's micro collections within psalms, like the Hallel psalms, the praise psalms that start around 113 and go to 118. They form a micro collection. There's a micro collection here that starts about Psalm 73 and goes to Psalm 78. But these are assembled together, right? So they're doing so thematically. It's found in the collection of books that often, if you subscribe to that theory that we talked about, where there's 5 different collections of Psalms in the book of Psalms, and it's generally understood that that is the case, each one tends to thematically deal with certain aspects or is viewed through the lens of certain aspects of Israel's life, the life of Israel as a nation and its relationship to God. This particular one happens to fall within the collection that most often deals with or is viewed through the lens of Israel in captivity or God's people in captivity. That's not to say that that's what Asaph was writing about. This happens way before that. But that's how those collections are put together thematically. We covered that all in detail. I'm just trying to jog your memory on that. So, certainly the idea of divine justice, the idea of experiencing that sort of deliverance from maybe oppression by the arrogant in this particular thing. Are they members of Israel? Are they people outside the covenant that's causing that problem? Well, we don't have the historical situation to know one way or the other. Could be one, the other, could be both. Well, not both, but it could equally be one or the other. I have no idea. But it really doesn't matter because it gives us sort of a general picture of, a picture of gratitude and vindication of God's faithful people, after a period of difficulty. Maybe it even looks forward. Maybe they're in the midst of difficulty and they're giving thanks for something that is to come. These are all options that are on the table. How might the idea of divine deliverance be implied in this particular text? Well, it's talking about judgment, but let me take a look at some of this. If he's talking about at a set time that I appoint, I will judge. There is a coming point. If it has not come, it is coming where God will right the balance, will deal with the oppressors or whatever it might be. So there is a sense of the surety of this coming deliverance, because there is coming a time, and we know this just with even more information than they would have known, that there is coming a time where God will judge, and he will judge in righteousness at the final day of the Lord. So, but as I've said before, there's a lot of smaller days of the Lord coming in judgment that point ultimately all in some form or another, even if it's just this judgment points to a larger judgment that's to come. Yes, this one group of people or persons being a crumb, but God's going to judge the entire sinful world, everybody.
It could also be a statement of faith on their part, because if you look at the history of Israel, God has repeatedly delivered them from situations, many times situations they didn't deserve to be delivered from, but God was faithful to them. And so even in their time of strife or trial, they know that God will be faithful, and he will eventually deliver them. So it could be more of a statement of faith on their part.
It could be. It absolutely could be something like that going on here. Take a look at the idea of this particular thing in verse 7. You see the idea of this deliverance being divinely wrought. This is not some deliverance that is by happenstance. This is not some deliverance that is brought about. Now, God may use human agents in order to do this, but like God used various nations to deal with his wayward people. But ultimately, who is behind the individuals on a national scale and individual level that was used as the switch in God's hand to discipline his people? God is the one who's holding the switch. You see this particular thing in verse 7 where it says, it is God who executes judgment. And that tells us a couple of things about that. It won't be counter to his character or nature. It won't be unmerited. It won't be unfair. It won't be partial in the sense that God is not a respecter of people. God has punished his covenant people as well as he has punished the people who are outside of that covenant and the Canaanites and things of that nature. So, there's kind of a picture here of it being divinely wrought and everything that goes along and is implied with that. And there's the picture in verse 10 when it comes to this idea of judgment. There's a picture of personal responsibility here in the face of that. That's not God saying that he's going to do that at the very end. That's Asaph talking in that last strophe. And you can see this is Asaph's praise of solidarity with God. So, needless to say, you can see this picture of this divine judgment taking place, both in the divine side of things with God bringing these things together to work his will, and then you see the individual engagement in line with the character and the statutes of God that have been revealed to do their part in dealing justice and doing justice in a way in which is appropriate and doesn't usurp God. Yes?
Question, in verse 10, the reference to all the horns
Yes.
of the wicked versus all the horns of right, is that a metaphor for religion? Because they did have a horn they would sprinkle blood on for atonement.
Right.
So is this contrasting those who worship false gods versus God's people?
Probably not, because God's people, the horn had a lot of different meanings in the ancient Near East, right? Kings, well, think about, there is a cultic, and when I say cultic, that's the general word that's used for anything that's of religious nature, okay? I'm not saying it's a cult, but they refer to it as a cult. So if you ever hear anybody say the Israel cult or they're not saying we're a cult, they're saying that it's just a religious thing. There's a cultic significance to the horn. The altar, whenever they ran to a city of refuge, what were they supposed to do? Grab the horn on the altar, because there was cultic significance to that. Now, how many of you have been around bulls? Have you ever tried to cross a field that had a bull in it? I know out in Oklahoma we had those big longhorns, and I always had to cross one portion of a field to get to the place where I wanted to actually get to go fishing. What do those horns convey on a bull? What did I say? You mess with the bull, you're going to get the what? Horns. Why? Because bulls are kind of mean, right?
They're dangerous.
They're dangerous. Yes, they are dangerous. No, but I mean, what is? It's a symbol of power, right? Do you want the horns? I don't want the horns. Nobody wants the horns, except for those ridiculous people that run in wherever it is in Spain. And occasionally somebody will get to meet the power of a bull that is transmitted through his horns. In the ancient Near East, it carried with it the idea of power. You see that in a lot of apocalyptic writing in Daniel. The beast had horns all over it, and this horn often represented the power of a nation or the power of a king. You see that in Revelation. You also see it just in the general poetic engagement in these things. So the horns of the wicked, especially if we're talking about the arrogance of the wicked, would be maybe what they take their pride in, or that which they see as their power or right to oppress in some way. And that's sort of the picture that we see here. It's over and over again we see it. We see there's haughtiness, this arrogance that's being spoken of in here. Remember, there's the parallelism that's going on in these particular songs. Do not lift your horn on high or speak with a haughty neck. Now, this is this advances the thought in the second colon that we see in the first. Now, how many have something different in verse 5 than a haughty neck? Stiff neck, okay? A stiff neck. How many has something different than that?
Insolent.
Yeah, insolent pride.
What do you have?
New American Standard.
Bless your heart. There you go. Insolent pride. Now, if you've been charged by an animal with horns, by a bull, it's okay if they got their head down because they're not paying much attention to you. But if they perceive a challenge or they're trying to strut their stuff and show domination over a territory, they'll. Same thing with people. It's the picture here. It's outstretched neck. It's that kind of, sort of like, it's the challenge. It's a picture of insolent pride. That's a great rendering of it. It's not a.
Do you have chocolate?
Do I have chocolate?
Yeah.
No. Well, now I kind of want chocolate. You might need to see if somebody isn't having some kind of diabetic thing back there. I mean, I don't know why they'd be asking for chocolate. I want to make sure everybody's okay. I don't even know. Would you even give a diabetic chocolate? Oh, well, I don't know. Maybe I need to learn before I run into something like that. Anyway, the idea of divine judgment against sin is not a source of fright for people in that right walk with God. Back then or today. In Psalm 139, David found it a comfort that there was nowhere that he could go that God wasn't there. That he would often say, "Search me and know, O Lord." That is not a frightful thing for somebody who is in a good standing and good walk with God, but it's a terror to somebody who is not. I love the way John writes it in 1 John chapter 2, 28 and 29, talking about, this idea of the proper walk with God, what that looks like. Then he gets down to the end of this after condemning those who said, don't love the world or the things of the world because they're fading away. Don't, if you walk and you claim to be a child of God, then you must walk as Jesus walked and demonstrate that claim in your actions in life. Then at the very end of the chapter, he says, now little children, abide in him so that when he appears, we may have confidence and not shrink from him in shame at his coming. That we might have confidence, abide in him. And that to abide in him is to make your home with him. It's the idea of, it's another way of speaking about this close walk. Walking in that light as he is in the light. You are making you're pitching your tent with God. That's the picture that we see in some sense. And for those people who are in that walk, the idea that are walking in the light as he is in the light, the idea of a return of Jesus carries with it some great things, because one, it's a day of vindication for God's people who have faced difficulties and oppression throughout by a world and an order that is arrayed against God. It's a day of vindication. Remember we talked about these Thanksgiving Psalms have thematic images of victory tied to it. Well, we see that here. You see that in this particular thing. The idea when Jesus comes back that we might have confidence before him. To have confidence before Christ when he comes back is to be on the victorious side. But those who are living counter to that, whose life does not match their profession, they have reason to shrink from him in shame. They have reason. And you see that it's going back to two ways dynamic. You see this dynamic that goes throughout the Bible in many different threads and forms. I find it very fascinating. And as the Israelites offered up praises of sacrifice to God in thanksgiving, are we supposed to do that today? Yes. They gave praise for deliverance from personal situations. We have an even greater reason to give praise because of deliverance from sin, and that greater deliverance that was to come that was found only in Jesus Christ as the sin bearer of the world, the sin offering. So we should be people who continually praise, giving thanks always for everything to God the Father in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, Ephesians 5:20, and others. So here are some elements that scholars note when it comes to praise psalms. And we're going to cover the text next week. I'm just setting you up on praise on Thanksgiving psalms. You may have detected these if you read through it, even if you read through it while I've been talking. The dominant mood is gratitude. Gratitude for a deliverance of some type. Most likely a deliverance that has already happened, could be looking for a deliverance that is to come, and it's being spoken of as a sure thing because that deliverance is rooted and grounded in a God who never changes and is faithful. The steadfast love of God often comes up in these type of things. There's an expressed intent to praise God, to give thanks to God at the beginning. And we also see it ending with further affirmations of praise and expressions of gratitude. Do we see that in this particular psalm? Start off, praise. Here's how I summarize it. Israel, give thanks to God. Israel gives thanks to God. Well, guess what happens at the very end? Asaph gives praise to God and expresses solidarity with God. He is affirming and accepting. He's interpolating that into his life. Then you see the other two strophes, but you see it beginning and ending with praise. It's followed by an account of distress that change has to come in the author's life. And this one is a little different than the norm because, again, it's communal, it's community rather than individual. But it appears that there are some who are troubling, boastful individuals, arrogant individuals, flexing their strength, their power, whatever that might be. And it's a problem, and that is something that they desire deliverance from. And then you see the idea that it has come, or that it is coming, or the basis for that deliverance in this particular case. And God is praised as a result. You also see a confession to direct that is designed to direct others to this God that is worthy of gratitude and thanks. And that's what we're looking at when it comes to these Psalms of Thanksgiving. Now, here's some quick details on this psalm. The author is Asaph, the head of a priestly family in charge of the temple music in David's day. Could also refer to a psalm by the descendants of Asaph, but I tend to view it as by Asaph in the time of David. So your mileage may vary. There's a strange notation. How many of you wondered what in the world is going on according to do not destroy? According to do not destroy. How many of you have something different there?
I've got set to do not destroy.
Say what?
Mine had set to
Okay,
do not destroy.
set to. And what did you have, Matt?
This says set to, and it's a word I can't pronounce.
I know, I was waiting for somebody to try to pronounce it because I don't think I can pronounce it. It sounds like Klingon, but it's Hebrew. That's the literal thing because I don't know what it means. And if you don't know what Klingon is, go watch some Star Trek every now and then. You'll see what I'm talking about. According to do not destroy, set to do not destroy. It's like, hey, I have a song and I'm going to set it to the tune of this. That's what we believe is happening here. We believe, some suggest it might be an instrument. Most likely it's a particular tune or style of music. This particular notation appears in Psalm 57 through 59, so it most likely refers to a style of music. How many strophes do you have in your translation? And we're going to be breaking those down next week. Hey, and here you go. If you didn't read it and didn't do your homework, you're going to have time to do your homework for next week when we go over that, okay? How many do you have? 5. What are you using? 5. Can I get a 3? Can I get a 4? Who has, wait, you have 3? What do you have? Okay. You have 4? 4. How many have 6? Who has a New King James Version?
It has 2, but I grouped those together myself.
Look what you did to me now.
So I guess I do have 6.
The NIV has 4. The New King James has 6. The CSB has 5. The ESV has 4. And I want you to know I'm using the ESV text, but I'm not following the ESV breakdown. And I'll explain why. Verses 2 through 5 is God speaking. It doesn't make sense to break up God's speech and put it in the first strophe, which the ESV does. I have no idea why they do that. They think there's a thematic tie. So I see verse 1 as its own strophe. Israel gives thanks to God. Verses 2 through 5, God speaks. God will judge mankind with equity or justness. Then in verses 6 through 8, you see Asaph speaking. The duality of God's righteous judgment. We'll explain more of that next week. And then it ends with praise. Asaph's praise with solidarity. Asaph's praise and his affirmation of his desire to pursue the justice of God. His solidarity with God. That's the picture that we see there. So, I think that's all I have. If you want to see something that sounds similar, has a lot of conceptual ties, I'll give you 2 extra prayers you can look at this week and just see how that both of them are prayers of thankfulness in response to a deliverance that is coming or has happened or is being worked at that moment. The first is Hannah's prayer. Her song in 1 Samuel chapter 2, verses 1 through 10. You're going to find a lot of similar themes. It's a Thanksgiving psalm. So read those themes, see if you can see how it is mimicked or picked up in this particular psalm. Then how many of you know what the Magnificat is? Right? That's Mary's, that's her expression of praise after she finds out that she's going to have, a child. And this is Luke chapter 1, 46 through 55. One is deliverance from childlessness. This one is deliverance for God's people, and thus all people, but she's going to suggest God's people, because of what's happening, what God is doing through this child. Both songs of thankfulness, both speak to victory, both speak to deliverance, and those themes are found in this as well. In fact, many similar phrases are found in that, and we'll look at that next week. Thoughts or questions? All righty. I appreciate you. Dude,
We asked Ken.
I like him. That's okay. I was afraid somebody might be having some kind of where they needed a piece of candy. I was looking at it. I didn't have chocolate. I just got chocolate from Landon.
My dad thought somebody that was having a diabetic.
So I agree with every.
He was like, that actually might be serious. Somebody needs you to check on it.
I'm in the class and I'm like, she's everybody. No,
I certainly do appreciate all of the fellowship, getting to meet and greet, and hello, good evening. It appears I'm speaking to myself. Hello. It's just everybody's talking really loud and ignoring me. Okay, everybody, I love that the fellowship is so intense. We have a few short announcements, and there may be some that need to be added because I'm just taking off of what's on the bulletin. I do believe there's a couple left over from Sunday. Certainly do hate to interrupt all of the fellowship. But of note, I haven't heard anything new, but Christine Wood, she was in a pretty bad car wreck. She had surgery to stop internal bleeding. In fact, it was due to injury to her spleen that occurred during the collision, as well as sustaining injury to her L4 vertebrae, which is can be very painful and something that lasts a long time. So continue to remember her and her family as they deal with this. Also, Sam Smallwood, a close friend of Joe and Tracy Burris, has been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. He's waiting to find out the next steps in his journey of dealing with this disease. So please pray for him to find successful treatments and for comfort. Also, just please remember that we have an extensive prayer list as well listed in the bulletin. And please take time to read through that and remember these folks in prayer. Also, I do know that we have Gary Simmons and Sherry Rochester are out of town, and I'm sure there's possibly more. I'm just not aware of it. Anybody? We do actually have some people in town, so I just want to make sure that everybody knows Emily is here, as it indeed needs warm welcomes from everybody. That's why I said Emily. I know she's a doctor. Thank you. Are you going to count? Yeah, you are. Okay. Did you hear me? Good. All righty. So, pretty good dig. Anyway, so jesting aside, we want to remember that on the 1st of December, this Sunday, Matt Phillips will be bringing our lesson that evening. So be sure to be here for that. Outreach group will be meeting on the 2nd at 9 a.m. here at the church building. And on the 7th will be our holiday dinner. Up and coming, please remember that the first, this Sunday, is the last day to be able to go into the annex, place your name and all others that will be within your group on an envelope, and please place your payment for the meal, adults 15 and children at 7 under the age of 10 for that. 10 and under. So yeah, if they're 9 and under, it's going to be 40 now. Please, if you plan to participate, bring a gift for the White Elephant Gift Exchange, and that's always a very fun time. It's very interesting to see how things go as new presents come out. It's always a fun time. It's a great time for us to get together and fellowship as a family. Also, I feel like I'm missing something. Do we have any additional announcements? Anybody? Josh?
I'd just like to add that on the holiday dinner, Cynthia, she looked at me on Sunday and said, "Are you going to be one of those that gets it on the last minute?" And I said, "No." Well, Cynthia, I am. I'm sorry.
I knew it.
Yeah. But I'll get it turned in on Sunday. Don't forget area-wide singing December 13th at West Ennis as well.
December 13th, West Ennis will be the next area-wide singing. At 7, that's a Friday. All right, West Ennis. All righty, so this evening we will be led in song by Hudson. 841 will be our song upcoming. And if you would like to also mark in your song book, the song of encouragement will be song number 421. 4:21.
Alright, for Sing Be Happy, we'll be singing the first and last verse. If the skies
I have a question for you, like I typically do. What do you see here? You don't have to answer it. Keep that. I know what you're looking at. What do you see there, right? How many of us see a black dot? Most people see a black dot. If they're honest, they're going to admit, I see a black dot, right? Because why did you focus on the black dot? Now, as a graphic designer, I could force you to look at the black dot, and I just did. Because it's basically an eye trap. You can't help but stare at it. It's just right there. Why did you look at it? You probably focused on it because it was the one thing that changed in your view, that dominate your view. But I never once suggested that I was referring to the slide. I said, what do you see here? What do you see there? I never once said what's on the slide. You guys just filled in the blank and looked at it. That's what you saw because you focused on that. You assumed that's what I meant. I want you to take a look around you, side to side. What do you see? Widen your perspective. What do you see? You see people that share a like precious faith. You see there's commonality. You see friends and family comprising an eternal spiritual family. You have community. You see brothers and sisters in Christ who truly care for you. You see connection. Commonality, community, and connection. These are some basic human needs, but they were obscured because we focused on the wrong thing. We focused on the dot. It's easy to focus on the dot because it dominates our life, because it's right there. What is the dot in your life? I want you to think about that for a minute. What's the dot in your life? What's the one thing in your life that is right here and you can't help but focus on it, and it drags your attention away from everything else, including maybe seeing the blessings of God? But by focusing on that problem, that whatever it may be, the dot in your life, that myopic focus obscures seeing possibilities, obscures seeing the blessings that surround us every day. And in doing so, do you think that robs us of our thankfulness? When we focus on the dot rather than what's behind it, what's around it, what surrounds us every day of our lives. And you could be the poorest person alive, you could have the most difficulties facing you, and there's still things to be thankful for. And I know that sounds cliche, but it's true. I have been to nations and seen some people whose shocking lack of material goods did not rob them of the joy that they had in life, of the blessings that they recognized. And did they have problems? Yes. Did they have dots? Yes. But that dot didn't rob the joy, didn't obscure the blessing. You see, the Israelites of old focused so much on the dots while they wandered. They complained to God. God, why are you doing this? Why don't we have Moses? We don't have this, that, and the other thing. Finally, they saw the giant dot in the promised land and saw nothing but problems. They ignored the blessings that Caleb and Joshua saw because of the dot. But Moses reminded them to see the bigger picture in Deuteronomy 1:29 and 31. Do not be in dread or afraid of them. The Lord your God goes before you, who goes before you will himself fight for you, just as he did for you in Egypt before your eyes, and in the wilderness where you have seen how the Lord your God carried you, as a man carries his son, all that way until you came to this place. Now he's telling this to the new generation getting ready to go into the promised land where the previous generation had failed. Where the previous generation saw the dot, he's reminding them to see that God is with them and will fight for them, that they are truly blessed despite the little dots that might be out there. Focus on the right thing. And what a tremendous difference the proper focus makes in life. This is not a call to be naive. This is not a call to unwise awareness of our situations. I used to work with the police. I'm a big proponent of situational awareness. But it's a reminder not to become so focused on the dot that we miss the blessings in life. And therefore, we could be people that can truly give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you. So tomorrow on Thanksgiving, you may have a terrible relative right across from you, wanting to talk politics. Your team may be getting beat. You might have all kinds of other problems. Maybe, I don't know what it might be. But resolve to widen your perspective and look past the dots that seem to loom so large and remember the blessings of God, because remembrance is something that is critical for gratitude, whether it's in the Old Testament or the New Testament. Something to think about. I hope you remember that tomorrow. I don't know what your needs are tonight, but you can come and we'll pray for you and pray with you. You can come and cast your cares on the Lord. I don't know, maybe you've got some dots in your life and you're focusing on that. Let us pray with you and help you to remember to look past and around at the blessings that are real in your life right now. And you have brothers and sisters that care for you and a God that says cast them on him. Whatever your needs are, I hope you'll come as we stand and sing.
I was singing.
Keep and sing from the peaceful shore, very deeply staying within, singing to rise no more. But the master of the sea heard my despairing cry. From the waters lifted me, now safe am
let me know that there's some cupcakes in the back if you want them. That's what I forgot.
Dad, lead us in a closing prayer.